There are moments in life when saying nothing says everything. Have you ever been in a situation where you walked away, said nothing, and yet that silence echoed louder than 1,000 words? Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's power dressed in humility. There is a profound beauty in silence that many of us miss because we live in a world addicted to noise. The pressure to speak, to react, to defend ourselves, and to explain every move has made us forget that sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. We often mistake silence for weakness, but in truth, silence is the voice of inner strength. Imagine a situation: you're in a heated argument with someone close to you. Maybe a friend, a sibling, or a colleague. They say things that are unkind, maybe even unfair. Your mind starts racing with responses. You can feel your pulse quicken, your voice ready to rise, and your pride standing tall like a warrior with a sword. But then something within you pauses. Something within you whispers, "Don't. Not everything deserves your reaction." That still, small pause is strength. Most people think strength is in shouting louder, being more aggressive, having the last word. But real strength is when you could say something harsh, but you choose not to. When you could fight, but you choose peace. When you could expose someone's flaws to win the argument, but you choose compassion. That choice, that restraint is where true strength lives. I remember once a dear friend of mine told me about a moment when her coworker falsely accused her of making a mistake in a project. Everyone in the office was talking about it. The easy response: she could have marched into the boss's office, explained the truth, exposed the coworker's insecurity, and walked out with applause. But instead she chose silence, not because she didn't have a defense, but because she didn't know her truth and didn't need anyone to validate it. Days later, the truth surfaced on its own. Her quiet dignity didn't go unnoticed. The boss respected her more. Her team admired her self-control. And most importantly, she walked away with her peace intact. See, when you stay silent in moments where people expect you to lash out, you shock them. Not with noise, but with your maturity. You disrupt the usual pattern. And in that disruption, people see your character more clearly than they ever would if you simply fought back. Silence is also the space where reflection grows. When you stop reacting instantly, you start responding wisely. You begin to notice: is this worth my energy? Is this aligned with my peace? What am I trying to prove, and to whom? Think about a lion. The lion doesn't react to every bark from a dog. It doesn't feel the need to roar every time something passes by. It walks calmly with presence, knowing that its silence is its authority. We must learn from this. Not every situation needs our volume. Not every moment deserves our voice. In your relationship, silence can heal. Sometimes, in an argument with someone you love, pausing instead of speaking can prevent days of regret. A single silent moment where you just listen, breathe, and hold space can stop an emotional storm from exploding. In your career, silence shows professionalism. When someone criticizes you unfairly, your calmness becomes your power. Your work, your consistency, your integrity, they speak louder than any defense you could give. In your personal growth, silence is the gateway to self-awareness. The quiet moments when you sit alone without distractions. Those are the moments when you meet the real you. Not the one shaped by opinions or applause, but the one who knows who they are when nobody's watching. Even in the spiritual sense, silence is sacred. It's in silence that prayer deepens, meditation strengthens, and clarity arises. Noise distracts, silence connects. When you sit in silence, you hear the voice of your soul. And that voice, it doesn't scream. It whispers softly, clearly, powerfully. Many times in life, your silence will be misunderstood. People may think you're afraid, that you've given up, that you're passive. Let them think, because those who truly understand strength will recognize your silence for what it truly is: a disciplined decision, a wise boundary, and a reflection of deep self-respect. There's a beautiful saying: a tiger doesn't lose sleep over the opinion of sheep. In the same way, you don't have to lose your inner peace over the noise of the world. Be still, be grounded, be silent, not because you're empty, but because you're full. Full of awareness, full of wisdom, full of strength. So the next time you feel the urge to shout, to retaliate, to type that comment, to send that message, pause. Breathe. Remember that silence is not your weakness. It's your quiet armor. And within it, you're not hiding, you're holding your power, holding your peace, holding your strength. Because silence is sometimes the loudest strength you'll ever carry. In the fast-paced rhythm of our lives, we often hear but rarely listen. We hear the noise around us, the notifications, the complaints, the demands, the constant chatter of the world. But how often do we truly pause, become still, and listen? Not just to others, but to ourselves, to the deeper meaning of what's being said, to what's not being said. Silence in this way is not about emptiness. It's about creating space to truly listen, not just hear. Let's understand the difference through a simple daily life moment. Imagine you're having a conversation with a close friend. They're trying to open up about something that's been bothering them. Maybe something deeply emotional or something that has made them question their worth. But you're distracted, half listening, nodding, checking your phone, already thinking about what you're going to say next. You heard them. But did you listen? Now rewind the scene. Same friend, same story. But this time you put the phone aside. You lean in. You're quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because you want to hear everything they're saying. You listen not just with your ears, but with your eyes, your heart, your still presence. You allow silence to fill the space between their words. You don't interrupt. You don't judge. You simply listen. And in that silence, healing happens. That friend walks away not just feeling heard, but feeling as valued, because you gave them the rare gift of undivided, silent attention. You created a space that said, "You matter." That is the strength of silence. It transforms communication into connection. It builds bridges where noise builds walls. In the same way, in our professional lives, silence can be a superpower. There are moments in meetings, negotiations, or group discussions where we're tempted to jump in, to make our point, to not let the moment pass. But often, it's the one who listens deeply who ends up speaking most powerfully. Why? Because while others are rushing to speak, they're gathering insight. While others are reacting, they're observing. Their silence becomes their preparation. And when they finally speak, their words are not random. They're rooted and intentional and impactful. I remember a manager once told me about a team member who barely spoke in meetings. Others were loud, always trying to prove their knowledge. But when this quiet employee finally shared his thoughts, the entire room fell silent. Why? Because in his silence, he was listening to everyone, catching details others missed, understanding people's emotions, seeing the full picture. And when he finally spoke, he brought clarity, he brought solutions. His silence gave weight to his words. There is a power in listening that comes only when you're not focused on yourself. Most of us listen to a reply. But what if we started listening to understand? What if we made our silence a sanctuary for others to feel safe, seen, and heard? Silence also sharpens our inner listening. Sometimes life speaks to us in whispers, but we're too noisy to hear it. Our intuition, our conscience, our inner wisdom, it's always speaking. But if our minds are always rushing, if we're always trying to speak over our fears and doubts, we miss the deeper truths. Have you ever made a big decision in life, changing jobs, ending a relationship, starting something new, and before doing it, you had a small voice within that told you what to do? That voice didn't shout, it whispered. And maybe the moment you got quiet, during a walk, a prayer, a moment under the stars, you heard it clearly. That was not the silence of the world. That was the voice of silence. One day I met a monk who told me, "In silence you hear what the soul wants to say." That stayed with me. Because most of our suffering doesn't come from what we lack. It comes from not hearing ourselves clearly. We follow the crowd, we follow the noise, we follow the trends. But what if we paused? What if we sat in silence and asked ourselves, what do I really want? What am I truly feeling? What am I pretending not to know? In silence, those answers rise. Even in conflict, silence can be the difference between damage and discovery. When someone confronts you, accuses you, or hurts you with words, your first instinct may be to fire back. But what if you stayed quiet, not out of weakness, but out of strength? What if you let their words settle, let your emotions calm down, and then listened not just to their voice, but to their pain behind the voice? Sometimes people shout not because they hate you, but because they don't know how to express their hurt. If we listen beyond the volume, We may find compassion where we were ready to find offense. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's a deeper form of communication. It's saying, I'm here. It's saying, I care. It's saying, you don't have to rush. Take your time. In a world where everyone wants to be heard, be the person who listens. In a world where everyone wants to speak, be the soul who understands. And in a life full of noise, find your strength not in being louder, but in being still enough to listen. That's not just wisdom, that's power. There's a small gap between what happens to us and how we respond. That gap is sacred. That space between stimulus and reaction is where our true power lies. And the one thing that can fill that space wisely is a silency. Silence is not about retreating from reality. It's about creating a pause that allows us to shift from reacting impulsively to responding mindfully. In that pause, we discover self-control, clarity, and the ability to act from strength rather than emotion. Let's take a simple daily life example. Imagine you're driving on a busy road. You're already running late, and suddenly another car swerves in front of you without any signal. Your natural instinct, slam the horn, maybe roll down the window and yell. Your blood boils, your ego rises, and you feel justified in reacting. But now imagine that just before you honk or shout, you pause. You take one deep breath. In that silent moment, you ask yourself, what will I gain from reacting? That tiny pause, that choice to be silent for even just 3 seconds, shifts everything. You realize something profound. The other driver is gone, unaware of the storm they left behind. But now you have the choice to carry the anger or to leave it behind. Silence in that moment becomes your strength, not because you let the wrong slide, but because you didn't let it rule you. That's the power of creating a pause. Most people react without thinking. It's how arguments start, how friendships break, how regrets are born. We say things we don't mean. We send that message, make that call, or post that comment, then later wish we had just waited. Silence isn't inaction. It's preparation. It's collecting your thoughts before you express them. It's allowing your heart to cool down before you speak from a place of hurt. Think about someone who has hurt you recently, not physically but emotionally. Maybe they criticized you unfairly, maybe they spread a rumor. Your instinct might be to defend yourself, to correct them publicly, or to tell them exactly what you think of their behavior. But if you act immediately, chances are your words will be sharp, your energy tense, and your response reactive. But what if instead you gave yourself silence? Not days of silence to bury emotions, but a few hours, even a few minutes, of inner stillness to sort out what's worth addressing and what's not. You might realize that the situation doesn't need confrontation, it needs compassion. Or maybe it does need a conversation, but one delivered with calm, not chaos. Silence helps you make that distinction. This principle also applies in the workplace. Suppose your boss gives you harsh feedback in front of others. You feel embarrassed, even humiliated. The reactive response, argue back, defend your position, let them know they're wrong. But the response born from silence, you acknowledge the feedback with grace in the moment, and later, when emotions are settled, you seek a private conversation. You respond with maturity. You don't lose control to prove your worth. You maintain dignity because you know your worth. People admire those who stay composed under pressure. It doesn't mean you're emotionless. It means you don't allow emotions to hijack your character. That composure is born not from suppression, but from creating space, a sacred pause that silence gifts us. Children offer us another beautiful example. Have you noticed how a child throws a tantrum? They scream, they cry, they want attention. If the parent shouts back, it escalates. But wise parents stay calm. They hold space. They breathe. They let the child express, and then they guide them. That's what we can learn. Silence is not ignoring the storm. It's choosing not to become the storm. Even in relationships, especially romantic ones, silence can save connections. During an argument, it's tempting to interrupt, to talk over the other, to prove you're right. But when one person chooses silence, not the cold, dismissive kind, but the respectful kind that listens, it shifts the energy. Suddenly, the argument becomes a dialogue. The silence is no longer empty, it becomes a bridge toward understanding. On a personal level, practicing this kind of silent pause builds self-awareness. It teaches us to recognize our triggers, To catch the moment when ego wants to speak and instead ask, what outcome do I want from this? It allows us to lead our emotions rather than be led by them. And this is not about being passive. It's about being powerful. It's about choosing our responses wisely, because every response we give shapes our reality, our relationships, and our reputation. Silence is not weakness. It is wisdom disguised as stillness. One of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves in this noisy, fast, reacting world is the gift of the pause. That space between action and reaction. That breath between hurt and healing. That moment between frustration and understanding. And it begins with silence. So the next time you're in a situation that triggers you, don't rush to speak. Let silence speak first. Let it wrap around your thoughts, cool your emotions, and center your mind. Because it's in that sacred pause that you'll find not just your best response, but your highest self. There is a quiet power that flows through people who know how to control their energy, especially during moments of provocation. This power doesn't shout, doesn't slam doors, doesn't curse or complain. It simply walks away. And not because it's weak, but because it's wise. It knows that not every battle is worth fighting. It understands that inner peace is far more valuable than proving a point. That's what true strength looks like, the ability to walk away silently when your ego is screaming for revenge, when your pride is demanding justice, and when everything in you wants to react, yet you choose to protect your peace. Let me take you to a common situation in our daily lives. You're at work, and a coworker throws a sarcastic comment at you in a meeting. Maybe they make fun of your idea. Maybe they subtly try to discredit you in front of others. Every muscle in your body wants to defend yourself. You want to show them you're not someone to be messed with. But in that moment, you remember one thing. My value doesn't decrease just because someone else fails to see it. So you stay silent, you take a deep breath. You let the moment pass, and instead of lowering your energy to match theirs, you elevate your self-control to rise above. Later, when your silence echoes louder than their words, when your actions speak through the results you deliver, the room starts to see who carries real strength. That's the beauty of walking away, not to retreat, but to rise. There is immense dignity in restraint. In today's world, we've been conditioned to think that speaking your mind is always the way to win. But sometimes, walking away is the loudest declaration of power. Because you're not walking away to avoid a fight. You're walking away to preserve what truly matters, your peace, your purpose, your emotional well-being. Think of a relationship that turned toxic, not because love was missing, but because respect was. Every conversation turns into an argument. Every silence becomes a punishment. The love you once shared now feels like a battlefield. It takes immense courage to walk away from someone you once couldn't imagine life without. But sometimes silence and space are the most healing responses. Walking away doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared enough about yourself to stop bleeding for someone who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You see, silence teaches you to discern where to pour your energy. Just because someone invites you to drama doesn't mean you have to attend. Just because someone tries to trigger you doesn't mean you have to react. Walking away is your declaration that their chaos cannot enter your calm. I once met a young woman who had been repeatedly belittled by her partner, not in loud, abusive ways, but through small, consistent jabs that chipped away at her self-esteem. Every time she tried to express her feelings, it was turned against her. She realized that she had two choices: stay and keep explaining her worth, or leave and reclaim her voice. One day, she packed her things. No shouting, no revenge, no angry messages, just quiet dignity. That's silence. It was louder than all the arguments they ever had, because it said, I am done convincing you. I am done shrinking to fit your comfort. I am walking away, not to run, but to rise. That story is not unique. Every day, people are learning that walking away is a form of self-love. When your mental health is suffering, when your joy is being drained, when you are becoming a version of yourself you don't recognize, it's time to leave the room, close the chapter, take the walk. Because sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is not pray for peace, but protect it by choosing silence and distance. Walking away also gives space for growth, both yours and theirs. When you remove yourself from a toxic space, it forces others to reflect. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. Your absence becomes the mirror they didn't know they needed. But more importantly, it becomes the mirror you needed to see yourself clearly again. This kind of silence is not passive. It's powerful. It says, I no longer need to prove myself to anyone. I don't need to raise my voice to feel heard. I don't need to argue to feel seen. I don't need to be understood to be at peace. That's the transformation silence brings. It's okay to be the one who walks away first. It's okay to leave behind places that no longer grow you. It's okay to end conversations that drain you. Silence and walking away are not acts of defeat. They are sacred boundaries set by people who value their emotional hygiene, people who realize that their energy is not up for grabs, that their light is not a tool for someone else's darkness. So the next time you feel the storm rising in your heart, the urge to respond, to explain, to retaliate, try something different. Walk away, not with bitterness, not with arrogance, but with the kind of silence that says, I respect myself too much to stay in places that don't. Because in the end, not every fight deserves your fire. And sometimes, the strongest warriors are not the ones who shout the loudest, but the ones who walk away in quiet strength, knowing they've already won the battle within. There's a subtle but profound truth we often overlook in the chaos of daily life. Silence can protect you from saying something that your future self will regret. In the moment, when emotions are high, when anger burns, when disappointment stings, when ego shouts, it feels like speaking out is the only way to release the pressure. But more often than not, those are the moments when silence isn't just golden, it's the wisey. Because silence gives you time to respond with wisdom instead of reacting with emotion. It's a shield, a filter, a savior in disguise. Let's explore a common situation. You're in a heated conversation with someone you love deeply, a friend, a parent, a partner. They say something that strikes a nerve. Maybe they bring up your failure. Maybe they accuse you of something that touches a sensitive wound. You feel the anger rise, the need to defend yourself, to prove them wrong, to push back hard. Your tongue is ready with words that are sharper than knives. But in that very second, if you just pause, if you take one silent breath instead of shouting, everything can change. That silence is not weakness. It's a quiet moment where you ask yourself, is what I'm about to say going to help, or will it harm? Will it deepen the connection or destroy it? Because let's be honest, how many relationships have we damaged? How many beautiful connections have we lost? Not because of what happened, but because of what we said when we were hurting. You see, words can't be taken back. You can apologize. You can try to make it right. But once a word leaves your mouth, it becomes part of the other person's memory. And sometimes, a single sentence spoken in anger can cause wounds that take years to heal. Or worse, never heal at all. I remember a young man who once told me about a conversation he had with his father. His father had criticized him quite harshly during a difficult time. And in that moment, the son couldn't hold back. He shouted, insulted, and even said things like, "You've never supported me in anything. I wish I had a different father." It was just a few minutes of uncontrolled emotion, but those words broke something. Later, he regretted it deeply. His father didn't say much in return, just stayed silent. But the pain in his eyes said everything. Years passed, apologies were exchanged, but the memory of those words lingered. The silence his father chose in that moment wasn't weakness, it was grace. And the regret the son felt for not choosing silence, that was the real punishment. In our everyday lives, these moments show up more often than we realize. Maybe at work, when a colleague takes credit for your idea, or when a friend gossips behind your back, or when a loved one misunderstands your intentions. In these moments, we feel the urge to lash out, to set the record straight. But what if we learned to delay our reaction? What if we allowed silence to become our first response? It's in silence that our emotions settle. It's in silence that our wisdom speaks. The mind, when quiet, sees more clearly. You might realize that the issue isn't as big as it felt, or that the person didn't mean to hurt you, or that responding would only feed more negativity. Let me share another example. A woman I knew was in the middle of a custody battle. Emotions were intense. Her ex-husband would provoke her during court hearings and outside them. She told me that her first instinct every time was to shout, to accuse, to fight back. But her lawyer told her, every word you say will be used either to help or hurt your case. Choose wisely. That advice stayed with her. She chose silence over retaliation, dignity over drama, and in the end, not only did she protect her legal standing, she also protected her peace of mind, because while he was reacting, she was thinking. While he was shouting, she was preparing. That's the kind of power silence offers us. Even spiritually, silence is seen as a virtue. In many traditions, sages and monks take vows of silence, not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand the sacredness of words. They recognize that speech should be meaningful, purposeful, kind, and if it doesn't meet those criteria, it's better not spoken at all. Every time you want to speak in anger, ask yourself, will I be proud of these words tomorrow? If the answer is no, pause, breathe, be still, choose silence. This doesn't mean we suppress our emotions or avoid honest conversations. It means we delay our reaction just long enough to choose a better response. It means we value peace over being right. It means we protect our future from the damage of impulsive words. Because ultimately, silence is not just about withholding speech, it's about holding on to your integrity. It's about giving your higher self the mic instead of your hurt. It's about remembering that silence has never broken a relationship, but words spoken in haste often have. So the next time you're tempted to say something in the heat of the moment, remember this silence is not the absence of strength. It is the presence of it. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not say something you'll regret, but stay silent and walk away with your peace intact. Silence is not always about closing your mouth. It's about opening your awareness. In a world full of distractions, notifications, noise, and constant opinions flying in from every direction, silence becomes not just rare, it becomes sacred. And one of the most powerful things silence does for you is that it creates space to hear your inner voice. That voice that often gets drowned beneath external pressure, societal expectations, and the urge to please everyone around you. The voice that knows what you really want, how you truly feel, and where you are actually meant to go. But to hear it, you must quiet everything else. Let's take a simple scenario. You're making a major decision. Maybe it's about a job offer, a relationship, or moving to a new city. Everyone around you has opinions. Your friends are saying one thing. Your family is saying another. Social media is bombarding you with 10 reasons why you should quit your job and travel the world, or how staying stable is the key to success. In all this noise, you start to feel confused, overwhelmed, torn. You try to process everything logically, but deep inside, you feel a quiet tug toward one option. But you can't fully hear it because the noise outside is too loud. Now imagine you take one day to be silent. No phone, no input, just you. Maybe in nature, maybe in a quiet room, you sit with yourself, not to think your way into a decision, but to feel your way into alignment. And somewhere in that silence, your heart begins to whisper. You begin to notice what gives you peace and what gives you anxiety. You begin to realize that sometimes your deepest truth doesn't come with a trumpet. It comes with a whisper. And silence is how you make space for that whisper to be heard. This is why people often say, I need to clear my head. It's not just a phrase. It's a survival tool. Because when you're too caught up in the voices of others, you lose connection with the voice that matters most, your own. I remember a young artist who was struggling with whether to pursue her passion for painting full-time or continue in her corporate job. Her parents wanted security. Her friends admired her talent but warned her about financial instability, and she was caught in the middle, stuck between fear and desire. She told me one day, I feel like I've heard everyone's voice except mine. So I encouraged her to spend a few days alone, no social media, no discussions, just journaling, walking, meditating in silence. 3 days later, she came back and said, for the first time in a long time, I feel like I know what I want. Not what people expect of me, not what looks good on paper, but what feels true in my soul. That clarity didn't come from overthinking. It came from silence, from tuning out the world long enough to tune into herself. You see, your inner voice is your compass. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And it will guide you, but only if you give it the space to speak. That's why some of the wisest people in the world take regular pauses of silence to reconnect, to realign, to reset. Because without silence, you might end up climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. You might achieve goals that were never truly yours. You might wake up successful in everyone else's eyes, but empty in your own. Let's go deeper. Even in relationships, silence helps you hear what your heart is truly trying to say. When there's constant conversation, constant advice, constant back and forth, you might be reacting, not reflecting. But when you step back and let silence do its work, you begin to understand whether you miss the person or you just miss the routine. Whether you're holding on because of love or out of fear of loneliness. Whether you're compromising or abandoning your truth. These insights don't come from debates. They come from quiet honesty. And silence is the gateway to that kind of truth. Now let's talk about the spiritual side. In every spiritual tradition, from ancient monasteries to modern mindfulness retreats, silence is a path to the divine. Because in silence, you don't just hear yourself. You hear something greater than yourself. You feel connected. You realize that answers often come not when you force them, but when you make space for them. And silence is the space maker. Try it. The next time you're unsure, confused, overwhelmed, don't seek more opinions. Don't scroll for more answers. Just sit in silence, not to solve, but to surrender. Not to react, but to receive. Let your thoughts rise and fall. Let your emotions surface and settle. And in that sacred stillness, listen. You'll be surprised at the wisdom that flows from within. Because the truth is, everything you need to know you already know. But it's buried under layers of noise, and silence is the shovel that digs through all of it. It helps you unearth your truth, reclaim your voice, and follow a path that's not built on approval, but on authenticity. So guard your silence, honor it, create space for it, because in that space your best answers will arise, your greatest clarity will appear, and your true self will finally have a chance to speak, not loudly, not forcefully, but clearly, through the soft, guiding voice that's been inside you all along.